There is a silent epidemic destroying men today. It's not failure. It's not rejection. It's the desperate need to please. Too many men have traded their power for approval, smiling when they want to speak, agreeing when they want to lead, apologizing for being who they were designed to be. And the more they try to make her happy, the more distant she becomes. Why? Because energy doesn't lie. A man who seeks validation is a man who has forgotten his value. A woman cannot truly respect a man who fears her disapproval. She may enjoy the attention, she may appreciate the effort, but deep within her spirit, she loses trust in his strength. Because a man who cannot stand in his truth cannot be trusted to lead. Pleasing her becomes a performance, not a reflection of love. And every time you perform, you lose another piece of your authenticity, the very essence that makes you magnetic in the first place. When a man lives to please, he lives outside himself. He becomes reactive, uncertain, emotionally drained. But when he returns to alignment, when he begins to lead with purpose, not with fear, something shifts. His energy grows quiet but powerful. He no longer asks, "What does she want from me?" but "What does truth require of me?" That question restores his authority. It grounds his spirit and reawakens his masculine essence. The strength of a man is not proven in how much he gives, but in how wisely he gives it. Love without boundaries becomes self-betrayal. Compassion without discernment becomes weakness. A man's yes has no power if he has forgotten how to say no. True attraction is born from balance, the balance between empathy and authority, between openness and clarity. A woman may test you, but she's not testing your love. She's testing your leadership. She wants to feel your confidence, not your compliance. She wants to sense that your peace does not depend on her mood, that your purpose is greater than her reaction. Because when a man is anchored in purpose, his love feels safe. His energy feels like structure, not submission. Detachment is not indifference. It is spiritual discipline. It is the ability to hold love without losing identity. When you stop trying to please, you start to lead. And when you lead from integrity, not insecurity, you reclaim the natural polarity that fuels desire and respect. A man's peace is his power. His ability to remain calm in the face of chaos is what separates him from the noise of the world. So stop chasing approval. Stop performing for affection. Stand in your truth, speak with conviction, and let your presence be the anchor. Because a man rooted in purpose doesn't need to please to be loved. He is loved because he is rooted. When a man begins to seek validation over respect, he silently hands over his power. Validation feels good in the moment. It feeds the ego, soothes the insecurity, and gives a temporary sense of acceptance, but it is never lasting. Respect, on the other hand, is born out of consistency, integrity, and truth. The moment a man starts to adjust his behavior to be liked instead of being respected, he disconnects from his core. He becomes externally driven, measuring his worth through reactions rather than alignment. And when that happens, his presence loses weight, because true authority cannot coexist with emotional dependency. A woman might be flattered by a man's eagerness to please her, but deep within her spirit, she cannot revere a man who is led by her opinion. She may enjoy the comfort he provides, but she will not feel safe in his leadership. Respect is built when a man stands in truth, not when he bends for approval. The masculine heart is designed to guide, protect, and bring order. But when that order is replaced by the fear of rejection, he becomes unstable. His words lose conviction, his energy loses structure, and his confidence becomes fragile. A man who seeks validation will always be controlled by emotion. He will rise when praised and fall when criticized. But a man who seeks respect learns to anchor himself in purpose. He understands that being misunderstood is part of leadership, and being disliked does not make him unworthy. Respect requires courage, and courage demands that he be willing to disappoint others to remain true to himself. It is not arrogance, it is alignment. Because when a man stops seeking validation, he no longer needs the world to remind him of who he is. His spirit already knows. When a man begins to overplease, he shifts his energy from leadership to submission without realizing it. His intention may be pure. He wants peace, harmony, and connection. but in his attempt to avoid conflict, he abandons his natural position of strength. Leadership is not about control, it is about direction. It is the ability to move with purpose, even when the emotional current around you feels uncertain. But when a man chooses comfort over conviction, he starts living in reaction to others instead of from his inner compass. His energy becomes hesitant, his words lose clarity, and his presence no longer commands respect. A woman may not say it aloud, but she feels this shift immediately. She senses when a man's decisions come from fear rather than faith. When he says yes, not because he agrees, but because he's afraid to lose her approval. In that moment, polarity begins to fade. The masculine is designed to lead through certainty, while the feminine flows through trust. When a man stops leading, the natural dance of attraction is broken. She no longer feels his grounded presence. Instead, she feels his submission to her emotions. What once drew her to him begins to push her away. Over-pleasing doesn't create peace. It creates pressure. The man feels drained because he is constantly managing emotions that aren't his responsibility. He becomes anxious, waiting for cues to act instead of setting the tone himself. The truth is, leadership requires risk. The risk of being misunderstood. The risk of standing firm when others want you to bend. But that is where respect is born. When a man holds his position with love and firmness, his energy becomes magnetic again. He doesn't demand authority, he embodies it, and in doing so, restores the balance that attraction depends on. A man's masculinity is not defined by dominance or aggression. It is defined by his ability to hold boundaries with calm authority. Boundaries are not walls, they are clarity. They communicate what a man values, what he stands for, and what he will not compromise. When a man lives without boundaries, he becomes emotionally diluted. He gives too much too soon to too many. His words carry less weight because he has no inner structure supporting them. He begins to say yes when he means no, afraid to create tension, and in that moment he sacrifices his authenticity for comfort. Over time, this erodes both self-respect and the respect others have for him. A woman can feel the presence of a man who lacks boundaries. She might not be able to explain it, but she senses instability in his energy. He feels safe yet uncertain, kind yet inconsistent. She may appreciate his generosity, but she cannot fully trust his leadership. Deep down, the feminine longs for strength it can rest in, and strength without boundaries is chaos in disguise. A man without boundaries confuses love with servitude, thinking that constant accommodation will earn devotion. But in truth, it breeds quiet resentment and emotional exhaustion. Boundaries are not meant to push people away. They are meant to keep you aligned with your truth. They protect your peace, preserve your energy, and clarify your intentions. When a man establishes boundaries with love and firmness, he teaches others how to treat him. He no longer fears rejection because he understands that rejection cannot touch authenticity. The man who honors his boundaries operates from fullness, not fear. He gives freely, but not foolishly. His love is powerful because it flows from choice, not obligation, and that makes his presence both respected and desired. When a man's sense of worth is tied to a woman's approval, he becomes a slave to her validation without realizing it. Every compliment becomes a hit of emotional dopamine. Every criticism a dagger to his confidence. He begins to shape his behavior not from inner conviction, but from fear of losing her affection. In doing so, he disconnects from his masculine center, the grounded presence that moves with certainty, not desperation. A man like this may appear kind and attentive, but underneath his gestures lies anxiety, the silent plea of "please see me" is enough. That energy is felt, and it diminishes his power. True masculinity is not about earning validation, but radiating self-assurance. It's about knowing your value, even when no one affirms it. The moment you need someone to tell you you're worthy, you've given them control over your identity. When a woman senses this dependency, she may initially feel cherished, but over time, it becomes suffocating. The dynamic shifts from attraction to pity, from respect to subtle contempt, because the feminine does not desire to lead. It desires to trust a man who leads himself. A man grounded in self-worth is not arrogant, he is centered. He does not chase approval, he embodies peace. He knows that validation is temporary, but authenticity is eternal. His confidence doesn't need to be loud, it simply is. When he speaks, his words carry weight because they come from alignment, not performance. When he loves, his affection feels powerful because it flows from abundance, not emptiness. The paradox is that the less a man seeks validation, the more naturally he attracts it, because confidence born from self-respect is magnetic. He becomes a mirror that reflects strength, calm, and purpose, reminding others, especially the feminine, that true love is never earned. It is recognized. When a man begins to abandon his own purpose to revolve around a woman, he loses the very essence of his masculine energy. His dreams, his goals, his spiritual mission, these become secondary to maintaining her happiness. But here is the divine truth. No man was created to orbit around a woman. He was created to walk his path with vision, direction, and clarity. The moment he diverts his energy from that inner mission to constant appeasement, he becomes spiritually unanchored. His power, which once drew her in, begins to fade, and the relationship slowly shifts from admiration to imbalance. A man's purpose is the foundation of his identity. It's not selfish to protect it, it's sacred. When he prioritizes his mission, he's not neglecting love. He's preserving the strength that gives love its stability. The feminine may test his focus, not out of cruelty, but to feel his strength. She wants to know if his devotion to his purpose is unshakable, if his commitment to his vision is greater than his desire for comfort. When he fails that test and chooses her validation over his mission, something breaks in her trust. The dynamic turns from partnership to dependence, from passion to routine. Masculine energy is fueled by movement, creation, and purpose. A man who leads himself with clarity inspires a woman's trust. She relaxes into her feminine flow because she feels secure in his direction. But when he loses that purpose, both energies fall into confusion. He becomes reactive, she becomes restless. The secret is not to abandon love, but to love from fullness, from a place where your purpose leads your relationship, not the other way around. A man who walks in purpose is magnetic, not because he chases, but because his direction creates gravity. His life becomes a mission, not a negotiation. Masculine energy thrives in structure, order, and boundaries. When a man lacks boundaries, he opens the door for emotional chaos to invade his peace and drain his strength. The need to constantly please a woman often causes him to blur those lines, saying yes when he wants to say no, agreeing to things that contradict his truth, and sacrificing his values just to avoid conflict. But what he fails to realize is that every time he compromises his integrity for acceptance, he chips away at the foundation of his masculinity. Boundaries are not barriers, they are sacred definitions of who you are and what you stand for. Without them, a man becomes shapeless, easily molded by external emotions rather than guided by internal conviction. A woman feels safe with a man who has boundaries. She may test them, but deep within, she respects them. They tell her he knows who he is, that he cannot be swayed by temporary moods or desires. When he fails to set those boundaries, attraction begins to erode. The dynamic subtly shifts. She stops seeing him as a leader and starts perceiving him as a follower. The irony is that men often believe being overly accommodating creates harmony, but it does the opposite. It breeds quiet resentment and confusion, both in him and in her. Boundaries are an expression of self-respect. They say, I honor you, but I will not lose myself in loving you. They communicate emotional maturity, strength, and presence, the very qualities that awaken a woman's feminine energy. A man with boundaries doesn't fear rejection because his peace is not dependent on external approval. He understands that love without respect is weakness, and respect is born from clarity. Boundaries protect his power, his energy, and his divine masculine essence. When a man learns the art of emotional detachment, he unlocks one of the highest forms of masculine mastery. Detachment does not mean coldness or indifference. It means emotional sovereignty. It is the ability to feel deeply yet remain unshaken. It is the calm in the storm, the strength to love without losing yourself. A man who is emotionally detached is not controlled by his desires, nor is he enslaved by his emotions. He observes them, feels them, and channels them with wisdom. This detachment is what allows him to remain grounded even when the woman he loves withdraws, challenges him, or tests his strength. He does not beg, he does not chase. He remains steady, knowing that his worth is not defined by her reaction. This kind of emotional power is magnetic. It commands respect because it reflects inner peace. A woman instinctively trusts a man who cannot be emotionally manipulated. She senses that his decisions come from purpose, not impulse. In a world where many men crumble under emotional pressure, the one who stands still becomes a pillar of strength. His detachment gives him clarity. He can discern between love and illusion, connection and control. Emotional detachment is not about distance, it's about depth. It allows a man to connect with love consciously rather than compulsively. He doesn't give to get, he gives because he chooses to. And in that choice lies freedom. The energy of detachment is what keeps a man in his power. It's what prevents love from turning into neediness. When a man masters detachment, he becomes a force of stability. His love no longer wavers with circumstances, his peace cannot be taken, and his presence commands quiet reverence. He no longer reacts to life, he responds with purpose. The strength of a man is not measured by how much he can please others, but by how deeply he can stay rooted in who he truly is. When you stop chasing approval and start living from purpose, everything around you begins to shift. The world feels your energy differently. Women sense your presence differently. You stop seeking connection out of fear and start embodying love out of fullness. Masculinity is not about control, it's about command. Command over your mind, your emotions, your direction, and your energy. When you walk in that authority, you no longer need to prove your worth because your very presence speaks it. Never forget this truth. A woman does not fall in love with a man who gives her everything. She falls in love with the man who gives from a place of power, not need. When your purpose leads you, love follows naturally. When your spirit is anchored, your energy becomes unshakable. You were not born to serve at the feet of approval. You were born to stand in the authority of purpose. Your peace, your vision, and your discipline are sacred. Guard them. Because the moment you master yourself, you stop seeking validation and you start commanding respect.